Dr. Alison Darcy, founder of Woebot Health, is a pioneer in digital mental health. Named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in AI, she's at the forefront of her field, finding innovative solutions to address gaps in treatment and care. Dr. Darcy has authored over 40 publications and secured significant research grants. With Woebot, she's developed a groundbreaking platform that combines empathy and AI to provide personalized mental health support. Alison, it is truly a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So listen, before we dive into your incredible work with Woebot, I'd love to hear just a bit about your journey. I mean, what sparked your passion for mental health and how has that evolved over time?
Both of my parents were often kind of there for other people in a time of crisis or a time of need in a way that I think I took for granted and only later in life really reflected on as being part of this journey. But then I studied psychology in undergrad, and then I did I was a software developer in my early 20s after I graduated, because I thought I was going to do a career to pursue a career in clinical neuroscience. But in fact, I became really interested in sort of building like digital versions of maybe tools and interventions that could be helpful for people, but infinitely more scalable. And so I started on that kind of journey, which was slightly different. It was more about sort of treatment design or technology design in service of human outcomes. And so that's really how it grew. Is this a real intersection of the field of psychology and healthcare and technology and how they might be used. But this is more than 20 years ago. So it's been a much, I think, slower trajectory in the world than I might have imagined back then in 99, 2000.
You may be the first person that I've ever met that said, as a family unit, you openly discussed mental health, and obviously as a result of some of your father's challenges. But that is not something that I've heard often as we talk about mental health, is that as a family unit, people are openly discussing it. And then you start to talk a little bit about your background. Before we go there, can you explain what Woebot is for those who are unaware?
Woebot we call Woebot a mental health ally, but he's actually sort of a robot character that lives in an app on your mobile phone that just reaches out to you in a conversational way every day and just to check in how you're doing. And depending on your answer, Woebot can either invite you to engage in, maybe a technique to help you feel better right then and there in that moment. Or, if you're feeling pretty good, then Woebot might use that moment to sort of just tell you something really interesting, from a kind of core curriculum of concepts that is broadly mental health promoting. I think so. Woebot is as much a storyteller as he is a sort of an emotional support and guide for people. But it's based on concepts of cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think is, it's one of the best. It is the best and most supported approach to mental health that we have.
There are different mental health therapies or methods that are used. Yeah. What made the cognitive behavioral therapy the method of choice?
It's crucial to sort of understanding how Woebot works. And I really, I think a lot of digital tools that are available have been based on CBT, but they've always taken this side of CBT that's about teaching. And actually what Woebot did was really different. It was actually, instead of sort of teaching you something, let me show you something, let's explore it together, which is really the more of the flavor of what CBT is. So CBT's approach, cognitive behavior therapy. So cognitive stands for your thinking. So it's an approach that looks at your thought patterns, how you're thinking, what you're doing, that's the behavior part, and looks at how you're thinking about something or the things that you do every day and how that interacts with how you're feeling. So the basic idea is, look, it's not actually the day-to-day stuff that gets us down. It's how we internalize, it's how we think about that, and then how we might react in ways that sort of keep us in this place of like not doing great or not getting better or not, you know what I mean? It's negatively spiraling, and we want to be in a positive spiral. And so it could be often that simple. So what a great CBT coach could do, or this concept is based on stopping and looking and examining, okay, what is it that I'm doing? Or how is it that I'm thinking in characteristic ways? And a great CBT coach can facilitate that. But it turns out that a Woebot can also, in the moment that somebody is maybe feeling a little bit badly, can say, okay, so what's going on for you right now in your mind right now? How are you thinking about this? And so just take somebody step by step through this process of seeing, like, maybe the way I'm thinking is not actually fully reflective of what's actually happening. It might be a bit of a darker thing, or I'm going straight to me, I'm blaming myself, right? Or I'm blaming other people, or I'm thinking I'm a loser. And, you know, we all have these reactions. It's like a very negative critic kind of place. But what makes Woebot uniquely positioned to do it well is the fact that it's with you all the time, right? Woebot's in your pocket. And interestingly, the person who is most accredited with developing cognitive behavioral therapy, Aaron Beck, in his treatment manual, he actually suggests that clinicians should go to the houses of their patients to be by their side when they're confronted with some of these beliefs that about themselves and the world and other people that are inherently negative, so they can help you, talk you through them in real time. And obviously, clinicians don't have the time to do that.
You mentioned it's something you can have in your pocket all the time.
Yes.
And so that speaks to technology and the advances in technology.
Yeah.
Have you been surprised by how rapidly AI has become a part of our daily lives? And do you see that advance in technology really influencing the approach that you have taken with Woebot? And, it goes to your point about it's something we can always have in our pocket. And so are people getting comfortable and accustomed to that, utilizing AI for something like mental health?
I feel like we had already had that great leap towards things in our pocket with apps, right? Since since like app-based phones in 2008 or 2009, suddenly overnight we were very much accustomed to having the internet with us all the time, at least, and then apps that did certain things. Now, it was the infancy of technology. We had those apps did very specific things, and they did those things really well. Like, think about the maps on your phone or something, right? Like where we used to have to try and find directions or download them or, write them. Now we could just use our phones to navigate there. I think what we discovered when we created Woebot was just how accessible natural language is as a way to interact with the great technology that we have in our pocket. It's just a natural thing to do, is to speak, because we're human. And so that's the biggest advancement, I think, with AI and recent AI, is that now we can just ask for things in natural language, in normal words, and be understood. And similarly, Woebot was able to really engage people in a dark moment, because not in spite of it being AI, but because it's AI, because all Woebot had to do is say, "Hey, how's it going?"
You've also used some pretty interesting influences, I think, that inspires how that interaction take place. I think I read where, the design was inspired by Star Trek or Dr. Spock and Kermit the Frog and friends of yours. I mean, how do these pretty unique influences sort of impact, how Woebot functions or the functionality of it? I just thought that was a little interesting. What is it about Kermit the Frog that you felt would be vital to mental health therapy?
I don't understand how people just don't immediately understand how impactful Kermit the Frog was. I think, no, I mean, Sesame Street, legitimately, I think Sesame Street is just one of the most incredible innovations that we ever saw with TV. And it was, I think, the first time that creative people came together with psychologists to say, okay, how can we make something that is both engaging and educational in service of children who are at home all day, that are, I think something like they were watching dozens of hours of TV a week, right? And I think that's a very useful model for what we did. We sort of said, how can we take really amazing creative writers together with psychologists to make something engaging, but also helpful from a human health point of view? I mean, Kermit as a character is just beautiful, compassionate. I love when you look, especially around the sort of early 80s, or kind of when I was a child, it's not easy being green, like very self-reflective, really struggled. Like he's a beautiful character as a way of, and he's actually portraying, quite in-depth, difficult things to a childhood audience. I think it was just the execution was so beautiful. So he's very, I mean, and I just love his voice. I just think he is, he's good. He's a brilliant model for what we do. Woebot is also sort of gentle and quirky, compassionate, also humble. Same thing with Spock. Spock, humble individual. What I love about Spock is, as a model of a robot, Spock was half human, and at least the way that Leonard Nimoy played him, mm-hmm. It was that he shouldn't be like super robotic. He should actually be this Vulcan that is struggling with human emotions, and he does so in this using this observer mindset that creates distance between him. Beautiful model for the way Woebot should be. And so Woebot has this curiosity about human emotions, really trying to understand, but again, just always humble, polite. I thought those two characters were, they are really inspirational.
They are, but there has got to be a difference between the traditional face-to-face therapy and the uniqueness, which I would think has benefits as well as limitations in using Woebot. I mean, how do you compare Woebot to a human therapist?
That's the great question. And I think, it should be obvious that we're, the way that we're even talking about Woebot now, we very rarely talk about what kind of a character a therapist is, how are they showing up for a person? And that's because Woebot's really showing up in a very different way. It's not therapy as we know it. Like, it's very much not sit down and have 1 hour long conversation. What Woebot did really well was remove the architecture, the current, what I call the architecture of therapy. You don't have to go to a clinic. You don't have to, right? It's not at a certain time or place. It by definition are a distilled set of skills that's based on what you might do in a clinic with your therapist, but is delivered in real time as you live your life.
But can you get the personalization with Woebot that you might get with a human therapist?
A human therapist is based on a human-to-human relationship. Mm-hmm. This is based on something that's very different. And I would argue we should not try and be the human therapist. It should be its own thing, because again, it's the AI that facilitates an engagement. It's very non-intimidating, right? We actually there's a lot of data that suggests data that we didn't produce, that people would rather disclose something to an AI than another human. Why? Because we know it doesn't judge. And also, we know that for certain folks that have been maybe underestimated, disenfranchised, or underprivileged, there's a kind of a sociocultural baggage that gets superimposed on them when they're seeing a therapist often, right? Because therapists are human, and that's not there with an AI. So it's this very different encounter qualitatively and also quantitatively. These are short exposures. So that is based on a skill that nonetheless brings a lot of warmth and empathy and compassion, but is based on, okay, let's see if we can help you feel better in this moment so you can go back to living your life. And so there's very little sort of disruption to one's everyday, day-to-day life.
I see one of the real values in using this type of technology is really expanding mental health access or care. When you work with, for instance, when you partner with healthcare organizations like you have with Virtua, I would think that it allows a therapist to really expand immediate access or reach and effectiveness when, to your point earlier about it can be in your pocket at any time. You may not be able to reach out to your therapist at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you can interface. Do you find that that's really where its effectiveness is, through collaborating with organizations like ours or others to really expand its reach?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we started making Woebot the character and making that Woebot, helping Woebot show up for people in a way that enabled them to kind of engage in very good skills for themselves. Now, when we go into these partnerships, we're now helping Woebot be a great assistant to the clinician. And what's beautiful about that, like we know Woebot, currently about 80% of Woebot's conversations are happening outside of clinical hours.
So it's not meant to replace the traditional
not.
therapist. It is to augment.
It's to augment, and it's perfect hand in hand because, the clinician, clinician could see their patient and the patient could go home and be practicing the things that the clinician has said in real time with Woebot. And one of the pieces of feedback we've had from other partnerships is that then their patient comes back and they're better equipped to have a session. They're more educated, and of course they've literally been practicing. It's that whole thing about like when I don't know if you played the piano as a kid, but
no.
you have to
not
practice
as a kid nor
sessions.
an adult.
It's therapy doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's therapy is this drop in the ocean of the rest of the person's experience, and Woebot can help bridge that gap between what happens in the clinic and then when they go home and have to live their life, and so I think there's been that opportunity has been relatively underdeveloped before, and so we're really excited with the opportunity to work with clinicians on that.
So speaking of the ocean and development, the field of digital mental health is rapidly evolving. Is there any new or exciting developments that we can expect from Woebot in the near future?
Yes, loads. I mean, literally on that point we were just talking about, we're so excited. We're sitting down with the clinicians at Virtua to really understand in a local context as well, which is lovely. Like, what is it like on the ground for clinicians who are all busy people? And so being able to understand how can we make their life easier and reduce the workload for them whilst, increasing their confidence that their patient is well looked after between sessions as well. I mean, that's great, and that's the next frontier for us. So you're going to see a lot of really wonderful, clinical facing workflow kind of features that hopefully help people's life be a bit easier for the clinician as well as the patient.
You're leading a pretty dynamic company. I know it's got to be both exhilarating and demanding. So how do you maintain your mental health and well-being while still trying to drive innovation? And I'm placing that question on you, but I'm really asking for myself as well.
Oh, it's funny because this has been a journey too, right? I think I think better when I'm sort of physically moving around. So I do a lot of walking and like stomping around the neighborhoods. I'm famous for doing walking one-on-ones. And I guess I have a reputation for walking quickly. But I recently started running. And I use this Couch to 5K app, which I can't speak more highly of. It's so amazing because I feel so good. And I don't put myself under pressure to do anything else except get out and run as much as I want to and as little as I want to. So that's one thing. And then I offset that with, would you believe, dips in the sea. So I live near the sea and the coast, the Irish coast, and I do a lot of sea swimming, which is just, I mean, I say swimming, but you just get in and then out like a tea bag just to cool yourself down. And it's so exhilarating, and that is very, very good for my mental health.
So you said the Irish coast. So the accent that I hear is not from Texas. It's from
Dublin, Ireland. Yes. Now the company is based in America. We have 18 staff in Dublin, but the majority of our staff are between the East Coast and the West Coast of the US. I used to live in San Francisco until 2021.
Do you think conversations like the one we're having now will help to reduce, some of the stigma around mental health? I guess my other question to that is there any key insights or pieces of advice about mental health that you wish everyone knew? I mean, because there is still a challenge with getting people to seek out and receive the type of care and support that they need. So is there one piece of advice around mental health that you wish everyone knew that maybe goes overlooked? Or
to answer your first question, yes, definitely. Conversations like this are so important to understand that, like, everybody has mental health and everybody's going to have to look after it. And I think we're kind of just coming into our realization of that. Just like physical fitness, I think, was it in the 80s when we all realized, actually, we all need to exercise. It's just something that you have to do, I think we're in a similar place with mental health. We all have to actively maintain our mental health. And talking about it is so crucial and so important. The thing I wish everybody knew that I have just noticed that is sometimes overlooked unless you're in the seat where you're seeing patients, and it's that everybody's worries are just so similar to everybody else's worries. We all think we are somehow defective or bad or not normal, or we all worry about those things. We worry about not being X enough, where X is fat enough, thin enough, fast enough, professional enough, smart enough. People don't feel enough. And these are just sort of ubiquitous fears and worries that we actually all have. And talking about it is one thing, but I think just realizing, just mental health it just comes along with us. I think that's the leadership we've seen at Virtua, is you guys are so far ahead of understanding that mental health is intertwined with physical health and in everything that we do. And I think, that's a really exciting phase for us to get to, because it's not, we have to move past the stigma to be able to have conversations that are important and practical. And, everyone has to figure out kind of the formula that works for them.
I truly appreciate what you're doing to bring it to the forefront. I mean, I think it was exciting. Recently, you were featured on 60 Minutes talking about how you can merge technology with empathy and the compassion and bringing this type of support to folks that truly need it. So thank you for everything that you're doing to helping really tear down some of those walls. So I do have one final question for you. And I tend to present this to most leaders that I admire and that inspire me. And there's no correct or wrong answer. What would your 18-year-old self think about the person you have become?
Oh, that's such a good question, isn't it?
I think so. That's why I surprise people with it.
Because it both speaks to, reflecting on the person you are now, but also reflecting on the person who you were when you were 18. And I think I was, and I wonder, was I fortunate to have been as naive? I feel like I was quite a late developer, in terms, like, emotionally, socially, and I think now there's just been a lot of growth, and there's a lot of growth through pain and effort and, that emotional struggle. And actually, this is something that Woebot teaches. Those struggles are the things that gives rise to growth. And, so I think my 18-year-old self might have been like very fearful of that, but ultimately when you come out the other side, you're ultimately a more robust, better informed, hopefully wiser person for all of it. So
as a professional, would you encourage people to embrace that journey that allows them to, on the other side, become the person who we all want to be? And so that journey has value as opposed to trying to ignore it.
absolutely, it has value. That's right. It has value. We tend to think of people being successful in spite of their troubles. I've often thought people are successful because of them. That your struggle is something. Now, that I don't mean to be all Pollyanna, and so I obviously recognize there are absolutely structural issues that are incredibly challenging, but certainly from the perspective of being an entrepreneur, there's it's very difficult and there's a lot of growth, but all growth is painful. And it's kind of, so it should, right? That it is character forming. And so I think there's a lot to be said for coming through the other side and the person that you grow into because of it.
But some of us like to avoid as much of the pain as possible, and I happen to be one of those individuals. But listen, Alison,
well, that's also natural. That is also a good thing. That is a survival technique.
It has been a real privilege having you on the podcast today. I mean, really, thank you for sharing your expertise and your insight, illuminating how technology can merge seamlessly with passion and compassion to enhance mental health. I think it is something that more of us need to talk about. It is something that we need to encourage people to take ownership of their mental health and not be afraid to reach out and use whatever platform that there may be to help them to get to the other side. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of our Here for Good podcast. And thanks to my guest, Alison Darcy, for sharing her incredible story and journey with us. I look forward to you tuning in next time.